University of Technology, Association of Nutrition and Dietetics students. Welcome to our chat. It's Youth Month in Jamaica, and this is really exciting for us because this is a space where we can meet other youth advocates and talk about youth advocacy, especially in the healthy food space. And we want to highlight that this is an interactive session, and think about it less as a panel discussion and think about me less like a moderator and just someone that's here to facilitate discussion, and think about the quote unquote panelists just as persons that are here to talk to you and to meet you as we are in Youth Month and we want to meet and talk to other youth advocates. So today we're going to talk about generally just the strategies that we use in our healthy food policy advocacy space. And we hope to hear about some of the strategies you use as youth advocates, depending on what space you are in and what issues you're advocating for. We hope to talk about some of the challenges across our spaces, some of the successes that we've had, and just to learn from you. And we hope you can also learn from us as we think about recommendations as we go forward. So I'm going to invite everyone that's here to introduce yourselves, whether in the chat or if you want to raise your hand, we'll allow you to speak. And you can tell us why you're here, what you're hoping to learn. If you're from a youth organization, you can also say what organization you're from and tell us 3 words that describe the kind of work that you do in your organization. So I'll wait for a little to see if anyone's going to go in the chat or if anyone's going to raise their hand, and I'll ask our youth advocates to go. So Rosanna, who is the Health Education Officer at Foundation of Jamaica, can you tell us 3 words that describe the kind of work that you do, or 3 objects that would describe that work?
Hi, sure. Good afternoon again, everyone. So I'll probably do both. So for objects, I would use a heart, a scale, and a speakerphone.
Definitely. A heart, a scale, and a speakerphone. Okay, I love that. All right, so we see Shan from Jamaica going in the chat, and Shan is the Executive Director at Jamaica Youth Advocacy Network. So I'm gonna also ask you to go and tell us what are 3 words or 3 objects that you would use to describe your work in the healthy food policy space.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and very excited to be here. Interestingly, 2 of my 3 words just so happen to be in the name of my organization, Youth and Advocacy. And the other word that I wanted to also include was inclusion. I chose those specific words to the extent that, you know, the health and nutrition issues that we deal with in this space affect everyone, you know, from as early as prenatal to, you know, your elderly stage. And so it's very important to have different pockets of persons who are advocating for the issues. And Jan comes in to the conversation by advocating for adolescents and youth here in Jamaica to ensure that they have access to nutritious, healthy food that's fit for them and their development.
Okay, thank you so much. I see Regina Thomas from Nation News going in the chat. And Regina, we are so fine with you typing. I understand that your mic isn't working, but her 3 words are busy, exciting, and rewarding. And I know a lot of us would also agree with that in this space. Can you also tell us what issues are you interested in? What issues do you advocate for? While Tayer, who is the Youth Advocacy Officer at Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados, goes and tells us the 3 words that he would use to describe his work.
Hey, good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. It's certainly a pleasure to be here with everyone. I think Rosanna, Shani summed it all up for all of us, and Regina as well. It summed it up beautifully. In my work with the Heart and Stroke Foundation, my 3 words would be children, youth, and something different, action.
Children, I love that. Okay, especially the word action.
Yeah.
All right. Daniel is the Advocacy Officer and Coordinator of Healthy Caribbean Youth and at the Healthy Caribbean Coalition. Daniel, will you go and tell us the 3 words that you'd use to describe your work?
Sure. So hello, everyone, and kind of echoing what my friends, colleagues have already said, I think our work aligns, and so our words kind of align. The 3 words that I chose for the Healthy Caribbean Coalition are 1, civil society. We are a civil society, but we also empower and support other civil societies across the region, and those who are specifically focused on NCD prevention and control, and by extension, just a healthier Caribbean. Two, I would say resources. So my words are not as exciting as Rosanna's, but resources in that we empower our civil society by giving them the information to advocate. So we are like a one-stop shop for resources. And then three, networking. So we love to network regionally, but we also love to connect regional and international organizations together. So those would be my three: civil society, resources, one-stop shop. I'll actually tell you about a resource that we just recently launched, and networking.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Alex is a part of the UTech Association of Dietetics and Nutrition Students. Alex, can you tell us 3 words that describe the work that you do with your organization?
Okay. Food, medicine, and healing. So for us as dietitians, food is medicine. Medicine is healing. So it really ties into what our roles are, and not just healing in just general terms, but specific to food again, medicine, and healing. So those 3 words, I think, perfectly sum up what our main aims and aspirations are as nutrition professionals.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alex. I see Regina saying that as a journalist, she has to be multidimensional, but the health and well-being of Barbadians is her main focus. And I think this is a perfect space for you to share the experiences that you have in your field, because this is what we're interested in: the health and well-being of Caribbean people as a whole, and advocacy for healthy food policies that promote that health and well-being. We also see Shaniel Brown in the chat from Jamaica. She's a final year dietetics and nutrition student. Her words are advocacy, partnership, and nutrition. And we love that. Thank you so much, Shaniel. Throughout the discussion, we're going to move into the discussion now, but throughout the discussion, feel free to raise your hand at any point if you have anything to say. If anything that's said triggers something for you, you have an experience that's similar to something that one of our other advocates are talking about, feel free to also tell us about that experience and to share with us as we're sharing with you. So we're going to move right into talking about some of the strategies that we use in advocacy for health. And first, we're going to talk to Shanique, who is from JAN, as you have just heard. And at JAN, I'm the policy and advocacy coordinator there, so I can speak to some of the work that we do there. And at JAN, we have a history of focusing on rights-based advocacy in our work as a human rights organization generally that is focusing on this issue as a part of the right that children have to health and life and adequate food. And so we'll invite Shanique to tell us a little bit about JAN's work in this area, and also, most importantly, to define what is a rights-based approach for us, so that we can have a little bit of a further discussion about what that means and how we feel about this strategy being used in advocacy.
Okay, so thank you. So a rights-based approach, I think, includes a lot of things. Typically, what it does boil down to is that it's all about being very human-centric and being very tied into the individual who is being impacted by the issue that you're advocating for. Many times in advocacy, I think you have 2 types of advocates. You have people who are just very passionate about the issue and very passionate about standing up for other people. And then you have persons who are more directly impacted by the issue themselves. And, this is them speaking out and trying to get some sort of redress or action taken to ensure that their right is upheld. So when we think about rights-based approach, we think about rights and we think about the role of our duty bearers to ensure that they are in a place where they're able to uphold the rights of persons. And so taking a very rights-based approach to the work that we do at JAN also means that we encapsulate, principles such as just we're grounded in a very human rights driven way. Again, just being very human centric. And we are also grounded in a sense of, I mentioned inclusion. So to ensure that we are always informed by the persons who are more impacted by the work. So one of the things that we do at JN is we are advocating for the finalization of the school nutrition policy here in Jamaica. I know Barbados recently had theirs finalized and they're implementing now, and we want to get there soon. So we are working very hard to bring awareness. We're like in our late 20s, and we don't, not my connection being unstable, but we don't necessarily now experience the issues that are happening in the schools. And so we rely very heavily on young people who are in the schools and who are having the first-hand experience of their right to health and their right to adequate food and healthy food being not realized to guide the advocacy that we do. So it's really about putting the persons who are more likely to benefit from the action and the advocacy at the forefront and ensuring that their voices are amplified. My time is up. Thank you.
But it also seems like a lot of what you're saying is also about making sure that we have the right information, making sure that we're moving from a position of having evidence-based solutions, of finding, facts that go behind our work, having research behind our work to even move forward with this kind of rights-based approach. And so that also means involving young people definitely in the conversation to give us this kind of information about how we're supposed to go about this work, but then also having technical assistance and technical expertise. And this seems like a perfect time for Alex to jump in because I know that at UTANS, you primarily work as a student-based organization, and you are persons who work as current and future professionals in giving nutrition information. So maybe you could say a little bit about maybe how having information, having evidence and technical assistance assists in this kind of approach.
Thank you again, Sharika, and thank you for having me. I appreciate that nutrition is not being put in the kitchen, as people love to do, but to put it at the forefront, which it really needs to be. So for our nutrition advocacies, it's very important that we have the support of the information-based advocacy. And that would come from us as the dietitians and nutritionists. Because without this information, what is going to happen is that we're going to have all sorts of monkey business going on in the field, where everybody is going to come with their own philosophies and ways in which, their old wife fables and the midwife tales and all of that to try to treat persons which are human beings. And, I like to say to persons, yes, we eat every day, but have we ever taken the time out to understand the science behind the eating that we eat every day? So, for example, Jayan, I remember when they were just starting their school nutrition thingy, and you guys included us in the whole framework and paperwork that you were doing so that you can start off the right way. And that is why this current school nutrition policy is so successful, because it is supported by proper evidence. It's not what Tom say, Harry say. It is what the facts say. We have researched information that is now supporting. So when Danielle comes on the thing and she says that it is required that you eat a certain amount of carbohydrates, it's not because Danielle feels that, oh, that worked for her, but she would have spoken to somebody from the nutrition and dietetics fraternity that would have guided her reasoning and how she go about. So it is same with our advocacy. We cannot go out there preaching, and I like to use this word, preaching the good news of health without the proper information. It's very important that we get the proper information from the professionals.
Definitely. And I know that across our work, it's important that we partner with groups of not just the young persons in the field, like nutrition and dietetic students, but also, nutritionists and dietitians to inform our work. But I know when we speak about resources, we cannot speak about resources without bringing HCC, Healthy Caribbean Coalition, into the conversation. HCC does so much work in making sure that we have resources in the healthy food policy space to use in our work, and that can be used across the Caribbean to inform advocacy positions. And Daniel is going to share a little bit about a new resource that they have that is focused on rights-based advocacy, that includes information that we can use across different forms or topics, issues of advocacy. So Daniel, you can go ahead.
Thanks, Sharika. I already see that Shan pulled out her phone.
Yes,
So that's the QR code. Excellent. So thanks, Sharika. So yeah, going back to the three things that HCC, I think, really embodies HCC, and Sharika, what you mentioned too, one of those things is resources. And so we're super, super excited to be sharing this resource with you. You are one of the first to see. So it is called Our Health, Our Right, a Rights-Based Childhood Obesity Prevention Agenda for the Caribbean. And it is authored by none other than Mr. Pierre Cook Jr. He is our youth technical advisor. He is a fierce defender of human rights. So there's no surprise that he's the main author of this document. And really, what is the agenda for, or rather, who is the agenda for? So it really can be for youth and youth allies, but the target audience, and Pierre as a youth advocate himself, he was really focusing on youth. So those of us on the call and those who are not youth, but youth at heart, this is still something for you. When we're talking about what's in it for me, as you can see, anything that you want to know about rights, where to find them, and then if you're interested in really advocating for a healthier environment, this is the resource for you. Just thinking back to what Alex was saying and how Jan has always been so inclusive, we also kind of took that approach with this resource in that we ensured that it was reviewed and vetted and informed too by youth advocates across the region. So we're really quite proud of it. And, how do we use this? Let me think of a scenario, or invite you to think of a scenario. Let's say you're a student in a secondary school and unhealthy foods have become your norm. You are frustrated, as I imagine many of us on the call are, and you really want to advocate for healthier foods, and you want to write a letter to your principal or even further to your Minister of Health. This is the resource for you. You'd pick it up, you'd be able to argue in your letter and anchor your position in this rights-based approach. And I would actually encourage you to consider this because there's so many countries across the region right now that are actually considering school policy. We heard from Shan in Jamaica. To here, we know that this is the reality in Barbados, which is very exciting. So again, I think that this document is super, super timely. And I'm going to continue to refer to it throughout the conversation today where I can, but the QR code is there. Please take a pic, download, and we're really, really excited to be sharing this. So encouraging you to also share it widely. It does say that, the basis of it is childhood obesity, but it really can be used for any health advocacy approach. Okay, thanks, Sharika. That's my pitch.
Thank you so much. Okay, so far we've spoken about how we've been using a rights-based advocacy approach, how important technical assistance has been even in this approach, and some resources that we can use and that we have created so far to use as part of the strategy in this using this rights-based approach. Do you guys in the audience, does anyone have any thoughts about this approach? Have you guys ever seen this approach used? Do you use this approach in your work? To see, you can raise your hand and you can also send a message in the chat. Okay, while we're waiting for some responses, we want to also give some examples because I know that since we've been using this approach, we'll definitely be able to say how this approach has worked for us for different even areas of the healthy food policy space. And so something we've been talking about a lot just now has been the school nutrition policy. And specifically, we were talking about the policy in Barbados and that policy also coming into force in Jamaica. And so Tayer from HSFB and Shan from JN, I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about your work using this kind of approach with the school nutrition policy. Maybe give us an example of how this has worked for you using the rights-based approach.
Shan first, or?
You can go first, Tayer, since you're already ready.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And yes, absolutely. Alex, everyone touched on the important points on needing for data to drive your decisions, the resources that you need, and all the technical support that has to go into it. As you rightfully said, the school nutrition policy was launched here in Barbados and is in the process of being implemented. And these steps were extremely critical when it came to youth and what the youth did. The youth were at the forefront calling for this school nutrition policy. And what we did acknowledge at that time was that many of us who were in secondary school or at university at that time acknowledged that it would not be for us, but for generations to come. And a lot of the advocacy work that we do is based around that. And we have to acknowledge that a lot of it may not impact us within our school time or within our time, but it's for generations to come. And I think I was just reviewing the resource part that Danielle was just referring to. And for me, the standout point is pillar number 3, engagement. Engagement is absolutely critical. Engagement to the relevant stakeholders, as everyone said, but we have to engage on both sides of the coin. They have to engage us, as Alex spoke on, and we have to engage them and call for what we want and what we need to see. And it has to be, and if the data aligns with what the trends are showing and what the commonality is, as Alex says, not just Harry or Adam or Jane saying it, but the data is what's driving our decisions. And the engagement that follows that and how it's executed is even more critical in this process. And I believe that pillar 3 of engagement was what drew it over the line. And they see our program manager Francine here on the call, on the line, and she did exceptionally well. She always indicated that youth have to be at that forefront. Youth have to be at that forefront. And I just want to draw on a reference here before I go to Shan, that at the time, when they formed the committee for the review of the school nutrition policy to launch it, they didn't have any youth on the committee. And Francine was at the forefront saying, we must have youth on that committee, calling for what they want. And Danielle was critical in that. The youth at that time were extremely critical. And that is what we need to do. So data drive needs to be at the forefront, but also engagement as well, and how we engage in that process.
Right, definitely. Thank you, Tayer. Shan?
Yeah, so definitely some of the same principles that Taher would have mentioned also apply here at JN. So I think if I can just kind of extend on the last point I was making in discussing the rights-based approach. So, I was mentioning that we want to ensure that the young people who are actually in the schools and are experiencing the issues can be at the forefront of the advocacy. And so ways in which we would have done that is by having, sensitization sessions with them where we would let them know what the issues are that we are seeing, that we are also learning about, and to also hear from them directly about what some of the issues they're having in their schools. And what this has meant is that it really allowed us to expand our scope of work, because they were sharing issues that we would not necessarily see in like the research, or the little research there was. We wouldn't see in like the literature, and we wouldn't know of existing if they wouldn't have told us. So being able to also really understand the underground issues was very important. So through that method, we also engage young persons in the development of our position paper that we did around the need for a school nutrition policy, which would have incorporated us partnering with different youth organizations and student-led organizations here in Jamaica to inform that process, to ensure that at the end of the day, the 11 or 12 recommendations that we put forward for the policy were very true to what the actual issues were. And then one other last thing that, you know, we would have done is, and we're continuing to do now, is we're ensuring that we are engaging the stakeholders from that perspective. So 9 out of 10 times our meetings with the stakeholders are centered around, you know, that position paper that we would have developed, and having reviewed the policy in its draft stage and knowing what the issues are that are being explored there, ensuring that we are linking it back to the actual tangible results that young people, specifically the students, would need to see happening in the schools. So at all different fronts, even if we're doing the front-facing work, and sometimes our ambassadors themselves are the ones who are leading and, you know, doing the work as well. But we just ensure that at many points, at all times, that we are echoing their voices, their sentiments, and their own wants and needs.
Okay, thank you. So if you guys were a part of our 2-day workshop that we held last month, you would know that there are 4 areas primarily under healthy food policy advocacy that we advocate for. And the school nutrition policy is just one of them. One of our other areas is advocacy for front of package warning labels. And I know that HCC and also HFJ can talk a lot about experiences with that, as I know you guys have used a rights-based advocacy approach for that issue specifically. And so I want Danielle and also Rosanna, in that order, to tell us a little about how that works for front of package warning labels using that kind of approach, and what this has meant for you in your advocacy.
Thanks, Sharika. Yeah, I'm gonna, just to kind of see it all, I'm gonna just reference 2 specific activities. So one, this was our Better Labels, Better Choices, Better Health campaign. So this was I wouldn't say mass media, but it was a digital campaign that was promoted across the region, and really kind of going again back to that rights-based approach about the right to health, but also the right to information. So the one thing about FOPL, so just for those who might not be familiar, what we're promoting is, or what we're advocating for, is to have these Black octagon labels on ultra-processed foods, packaged foods, just so that it's easier for people to understand what they're consuming. This sort of information, we're very proud to advocate this bit. This sort of information helps and empowers consumers because it gives them the information right at the front. They don't have to do brain gymnastics to figure out what's in their food. So this was one of our powerful campaigns that came out promoting front of package nutrition warning labeling. So again, that right to health, but also really emphasizing that right to information. And then the second activity that I want to share that really put Healthy Caribbean Youth at the forefront was our I just shared it in the chat, but our front of package nutrition warning labeling demonstration. So essentially we had youth from across the region go to specific points of importance in their own country. They had signs, they had t-shirts, again, just to indicate the youth support for this policy. And we got quite a bit of media attention, but I think it was just important to emphasize that youth too believe in the importance of this right to health and this right to information, and the fact that front of package nutrition warning labeling can do that. So just to show you how this rights-based approach can be translated into different activities. And that's it for me. Thanks, Sharika.
Rosanna.
Hey, again, everyone. Okay, so Daniel basically touched a bit on, you know, the strategies that we also use here at the Heart Foundation of Jamaica, as well as with our youth advocate forum, where we recognize and we agree with the stance that, you know, being healthy should not be a privilege because it's a fundamental human right. And given that, you know, our health depends on being able to eat food products of, you know, good nutritional value, that we need to actually live or survive. You know, so that nutrition is also a human right, and it shouldn't be reserved for, you know, anyone who is privileged. So this is what we want our policymakers, as well as the food and beverage industry, to see. And, you know, that also help to inform the transition in our advocacy campaign messaging. So we started out asking the question in one of our front of package warning labeling campaigns, the mass media campaigns, what's in our food and demanding the facts. Then we transitioned under a rights-based perspective to say, hey, we have the right to know, speaking on behalf of our Jamaican populace, to know what we're eating. So provide us with the accurate information. So it's like we're trying to show that indivisible linkage between our fundamental right to proper nutrition or safe food per se. So foods that, have they don't have egregious amounts of the unhealthy fats, sodium or sugar, and linking it to our right to information, as Daniel alluded to earlier. So our right to information, knowing what exactly is, put in those ultra processed products or any food product, that we go to purchase as a consumer, as well as our right to life. So that's it in a nutshell for me.
Definitely. I absolutely cannot say it any better than Rosanna, and absolutely agree with all those sentiments. So we want to encourage you guys, remember, at any time, you can type in the chat and let us know what you're thinking, how you're feeling about anything that's being said, or any thoughts independently about, this topic, strategies that we use in advocacy generally, or specifically in health advocacy spaces. And I know sometimes it can be, a little frightening to speak to a group of people who you do not know, that you're not familiar with, but we encourage you to speak up. This is a space where we understand that we have to learn from each other, and that there are no right or wrong answers necessarily to things, but everything is something to talk through. And so we really appreciate your thoughts. But there's a poll that will come up on your screen, and please take the poll, even though the mics aren't being opened. All right, so I'm seeing the poll, and I'm going to go ahead and take the poll as well, as we move to the next section, where we're going to talk a little about some challenging aspects of youth advocacy. We acknowledge that we have these great strategies that have been working. We are seeing progress, as we've noted, specifically in Barbados and Jamaica with our school nutrition policy, and we know that we're doing things right. But we have to also acknowledge that as youth advocates, there can be challenging aspects no matter what issue you're advocating for. And so we think it's also fair to talk about these things and to create spaces where we can be open about our challenges, so that we can also collectively think about solutions to these problems. And so I know specifically that I want to start with Alex, because they talk a lot to young people about health and nutrition, and specifically around advocacy being around health and nutrition being youth informed, but also informed by data. And I know specifically there has to be definitely challenges with that. And so Alex, if you could tell us a little about maybe some challenges that you have advocating in the way that you do. Okay, now hearing from Alex, will anyone else tell us about any of the challenges that you have in your organization in the healthy food policy advocacy space? What are some things that you think are difficult?
All right, maybe I can jump in to kind of break the ice. One thing, apart from the usual challenges that we all can share as, or relate to as partner organizations, one thing which we will definitely delve into later on, but one thing I find interesting is, and it's kind of mind-boggling for me, is like basically, I guess, the engagement or garnering support from other, whether there be, NGOs, policymakers, or even fractions of the general population. Like, on our end here, though we have a cohort of partners, I mean, there's still a deficit in the level of support and action towards, or advocacy campaigns. So it's like, people will say, yes, we support, but it's like they just say, hey, yeah, but when it's action time, like there's not much, if you get what I'm saying.
I totally get that, Rosanna. And I also see Tara saying in the chat that education about food is one challenge. And Tara, I'll read the response that you have in the chat, but also feel free when I'm finished to open your mic and expound. And so Tara is saying that education about food is very overlooked, especially in the Caribbean, with how certain foods react in our bodies, like the importance of fiber and protein, etc. Tara, would you like to tell us more?
Hi. Yeah, sure. I find that especially in the Caribbean, because I live in Jamaica, and a lot of the everyday foods that we eat here that are affordable to our demographic is they're cheap ingredients, cheap food, and it's very starchy. It's very starch heavy. And people, when you see something in the average Jamaican or person in general, if they don't know about certain foods and how they react in your body, they think that they're doing the right thing, but they're really not. Like if you're going to eat chicken, they feel like, okay, now if you brown stew chicken, that still can be very unhealthy. It depends on how much oil you use. If you eat fried chicken, if you eat breadfruit and all these things that are just very, very starchy foods. If you look at our diets, it's full of plantain, rice and peas. Like our food is very rich. And I feel like some people just don't know how that affects your daily intake and how it adds up over time. But it's really not a lot of our fault too, because a lot of the companies that are manufacturing foods are pushing these products, especially on children, and they make all these cartoons and things that the children get attracted to them, and then they ask their parents for it, and the parents don't really know any better, because I mean, are you really going to tell your child, like, no, you can't have cereal, or no, you can't have this, or no, you can't have that, when you yourself don't really know any better as well? It's very, and that another thing is that they push towards the kids, because kids are like the easiest target. So the cereal boxes have characters on them. Then for the adults are looking at all of these different options that they, that say like no sugar added or no whatever. Like I looked at a pack of a plantain chip and it says no sugar. Okay, great. But do they know that plantain is still a starch? And at the end of the day, that starch is going to be stored as sugar if you eat too much of it. No, the average person would not know that. So I think it all begins with education is what I'm saying.
Definitely. As Daniel is saying in the chat, preach. Like all of that, I'm sure we agree with in this space. That's something that we talk about a lot. Industry interference and how that affects our work and how that just interferes with the kind of advocacy that we're trying to do and the kind of Caribbean that we're trying to create. And so I know Alex is back, and if he could just jump in, and I don't know if he heard some of what Tara was saying, because I know definitely also sentiments I've heard from him as well, with just having more information, education around food. Oh, and Tara is, for goodness grace, on Instagram. I actually follow your page. Thank you so much for the information that you put out there. And Alex, I know you might want to say something more about education, proper information around food and how important that is.
All right, so first of all, big up yourself, Tara, for speaking out. I like when persons defend the gospel of nutrition. And, you know, it is something that I see ever so often. Persons are out there sharing information, and persons are not properly trained, or even if they're not properly trained, because I know persons who are not dietitians or nutritionists that give wholesome information because they research before they put forth their data. And even if things that they let you know firsthand that, listen, this is something that Daniel tried. Daniel tried this, and that's why Daniel's skin is so pretty. But that does not mean that it works for everybody else. So it's very important that we tailor the information for the population. For example, we have Tahir maybe eats the same amount of food as Sharika, but Tahir distribution of his nutrients is different, but it's the same amount of calories Tahir eat as Sharika. So nutrition is not just a one size fit all. It is a personalized thing, just as you get a medical prescription, and that prescription is only for Rosanna, it's only for Shanique, it can't be for Alex. It's same with nutrition, it's personalized. And I think that is the issue with persons. They don't understand that, listen, it's not just, oh, eat a bunch of fruits, eat a bunch of vegetables, exercise, and no, it's more than that. There are factors, there are different stuff. So I really love persons like Tara, who is out there promoting the correct information. And Tara, anytime you want to back up your information, don't be afraid to follow me on Instagram. I'm going to put my handle in and message me. I like to collaborate with people who are interested in building nutrition. So I'm going to put my handle in the chat for Tara.
I love this. And we should all put our handles in the chat so that we can follow each other and so that we can keep informed based with the work that the different organizations are doing. So I'll put Jayan's handle in the chat as well. But also a really, really important point that I heard coming out that I think we can talk more about is industry interference. So I know that we've experienced this across organizations, across topics, across issues that we've advocated for. And so I want each of us to talk, or each of you guys to talk about industry interference, how this has affected your advocacy work, what it means for you, especially specific to whatever area you're specifically advocating under. Rosanna, can you go first? Because I know this has been huge, especially for Heart Foundation recently. So,
yes,
Rosanna, can you go first?
that we are big on this. So industry interference as a challenge. I mean, as we say here at HFJ, we witnessed the food and beverage industry employ like numerous tactics to thwart our advocacy efforts, like no matter what policy it is that we advocate for, right? So they do things like they directly lobby to the policymakers, or they manipulate public opinion through either earned or paid media. They try to corrupt the science, right? Even when we have evidence, from the region or even here in Jamaica, they go and try to, twist it their way, or try to even come up with their own, which is like always skewed, is flawed. Or, they try tactics to delay or intimidate, the government through litigation. And all these tactics not only make the journey for us, to achieve our goals or end targets a bit more difficult and controversial, but at the same time, it's denying, while we're doing that, we're doing it for the population. And what we want them to see is that when you're doing that, you're denying the population of their basic human rights. So going back to that rights-based, perspective. And one example I'd like to share, all Jamaicans online, they might be aware of it, like, back in 2018, when we had a legal suit that was brought on by a popular beverage company, right? And what happened is that there was an image posted, to show how much sugar is in a flavored water. Yes, the brand was posted, but we quickly recalled it. However, the information that was, posted to say, hey, this has about 35 grams of sugar, or 9 teaspoons, which is above the recommended limit of added sugar for children, men, women, right? And it was one big controversy. Persons were, just to see that information, they were shocked to say, hey, I thought this was a healthier alternative to like drinking a sugar sweetened beverage, but seeing that it is just as bad or even worse, so that brought, that's just one of the many means, they were persistent, or adamant that they are going to like, kind of, I guess, nip or advocacy efforts in the bud right there. But in the end, we prevailed and we were able to overcome that. And, from there, we've been receiving much more traction, much more support, and, persons are catching on.
Okay. Shan, you can go next and tell us, specifically for school nutrition policy, have you seen industry interference in this area, and how?
I was thinking about it. Initially, that wasn't how I understood the question, but I don't think Jayan has had done much work, or facing work with the industry. But I think just some of the concerns that we would have, you know, with the school nutrition policy coming up and hoping to be passed early next year, or to be finalized early next year rather. It's just the role that the industry will have to play in ensuring that you know, students can have access to the things that they need. So, I mean, persons that have mentioned on the call that, you know, they're very much concerned about their bottom line and about getting what they want, but we have to also understand that there are, you know, multitude of issues and multitude of interests at play. And I think it would be very interesting to see what the role of the, you know, the industry players will look like in that sort of environment when we come to it. I think we should, you know, reasonably anticipate some sort of pushback. I'm not really sure, you know, when they had their consultation, what that would have looked like. I saw some of the articles, and I think we are in for some interesting times. So maybe the next time we have this conversation when the policy is passed, Jayan will be able to say just how the industry work has been going for us. But right now, it's not something that we've done or had much to do with.
And then I agree with that. And then I think we definitely want to hear what's happening in Barbados. So Daniel, can you tell us a little about how this might affect your advocacy work?
I'll actually go to hear about maybe Barbados, and maybe I can give a regional perspective too on some of the things I've seen. Yeah, so to hear, I'll go after you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In Barbados, it's been pretty similar. What has happened is where a lot of the industry players involved have somewhat been misleading the public, especially in relation to their products, and how they market their products. So just last week, they've launched a campaign where they say that they're providing that healthier option, watch what you eat, watch what you drink, and saying that they have less sugar within their drinks, for example. But in reality, when we do the research and match it back to what was previously and see what's in the drinks now, it's still pretty much the same. So the reality is that now with the passing of the school nutrition policy, we have a basis from which we can operate from, so that if they go into the schools to market to our children, to market to our students, we have a basis of policy that speaks directly to that. On the other side of the coin as well, in terms of sponsorship, for example, lots of these bigger entities, big players in the game, they sponsor lots of our schools, whether it be in sports, whether it be in giving back, whether it be in providing to their needs. So that has posed to be a challenge as well. In this economic times, we do understand that challenge and that dynamic of it, because obviously these entities, these schools need the money, but in reality, what are they giving? What is the output? What is the results, and how impact is having on our children? And that is what is more important. Is it lives or livelihoods at the end of the day? Lives, I think, is more important in every aspect, and we really need to look up for that. But industry, we call it here in Barbados a ding-dong battle. So we always watch what the other side is doing, and they watch closely what we're doing, but we're winning the battle. We've been winning the battle over the last year here in Barbados, where we saw the increase in the tax on sugar sweetened beverages, the school nutrition policy being passed. Our Prime Minister speaks heavily on non-communicable diseases. We also saw the promoting of growing your own food and in the agricultural sector and what's not. So in Barbados, I would say we're moving very slowly, but it's slow wins, small wins leading to big wins in the future, where the front to label packaging is on our forefront right now. But yes, this industry has definitely impacted, but engagement is key. Engagement is key.
I see Rosanna saying to lend us your government for a year, please. There's some noise in my background, my apologies. But I think I want to close off this section now. If everyone's okay with that and no one has anything further to say, especially from the audience about how, you know, about any challenges that you have in this space. And I think we want to move to trying to figure out some recommendations, like how we can move to some solutions for the issues that we do have. And so from our quote unquote panel, I will ask Rosanna and Daniel in that order to tell us, just give us a recommendation for advocates in the healthy food policy space or in any space. it can be a recommendation for youth advocates or for persons like us who work in this space.
Okay, for me, my recommendation is simple, like despite the inevitable challenges, just continue to use your voice. It's your right to use your voice in, healthy food policy advocacy and the policy making process, any activity at all that you choose, right? And especially for our youth, I mean, your participation means, better decisions, increased efficiency, strengthen community capacity, and contribution to like positive development, right? So just continue to use your voice, I mean, despite whatever obstacles you may face.
Okay, Daniel?
Yeah, thanks, Sharika. So I would say, I think all of us in the health advocacy space, we know that we need to no longer work in silos. We know that we need to start really appreciating the synergies and the interlinkages between our works. And so I'd encourage everyone to not only hang on to your, for example, healthy food policy partners, but to expand to your environment partners, partners in sport, partners in mental health, because at the end of the day, we all have a very similar goal. I'm just thinking something like ultra processed foods. You've mentioned it a number of times, Tara, you mentioned it in your comments. The environmental impact of manufacturing ultra processed food is so great. And we know the harms to individual and human health. So kind of trying to make those connections and synergies and really putting forth a powerful argument. Connecting the dots. Yes, to hear you got it.
I love that recommendation too. Does anyone from the audience want to also give us a recommendation that you have for us as youth advocates working in the space? I see Tara in the chat saying that we're trying, but we need to start with the companies that produce these things. So definitely, I think what we are all saying is we need healthy food policy. We need policies and legislation around these things because individual action isn't going to work. We actually need to start reining in these companies and, putting in these taxes, putting these policies in place, regulating these environments, so that we can control some of what's happening. And this is all in an effort to make the environment more fair, to make it an environment where you can actually use your right to know, where that right can be realized. Because if you don't have the information like front of package warning labels, how will you be able to make the correct decisions about the food that you're eating? And so, just having those kinds of conversations. So I definitely agree with your point, Tara. I see you, Rosanna. In the chat, Rosanna is saying we want healthy food policies. No, and we definitely do. Does anyone else in the audience have anything to say before we close and tell you about some upcoming events that we have? Okay, I see Samika saying in the chat that at HFJ, we do a lot regarding education. However, we also have to keep in mind varying levels of literacy, right? So we believe in twofold, policy and education. Front of package warning labels will assist in making information more straightforward. Definitely. Yes. And also, I will say that at JN, that's something that's also important for us, especially as it relates to making this information something that's accessible and easy to understand for children and for young people. And I think we keep coming back to front of package warning labels, but that's why they're so important, because it's easy for anyone to understand. And those are the kinds of things we have to keep looking for, things that make, healthy food more accessible, and just that make healthy food the easier default option to make. All right, so I will move to closing. But first, we want to share some upcoming events that we have, because as I said in the beginning, this is one of a series of chats we're hoping to have like this, where we come together as youth advocates, try to hear from each other, learn from each other, talk about healthy food policy and other forms of advocacy. And so I will invite Daniel now to tell us a little bit about some of the upcoming things that we have going on.
Thanks, Sharika, and thanks everyone for your participation so far. So we have a couple, I know it's the end of the year, but we do have quite a few things happening in the space. So one, if you have your phones out right now, I would encourage you to participate in this poll that we have going on. So Jan, HCC, and Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados have partnered on this. So we have been talking about the marketing of unhealthy food and beverages. And just so you know, the facts that we're getting or the evidence that we're seeing from this poll. So again, YouReport is polling young people from across the region. They have said that they are in full support of any sort of policies that target the marketing of unhealthy foods to children. They have also said that they have been exposed to numerous advertisements marketing unhealthy foods and beverages to children. So I think everything is aligning really well, and we're hearing it from children and young people themselves. So all of that to say, encouraging you to take the poll. We also have a webinar. We've spoken a lot about industry interference today. And again, I think all of us on the call could spend a whole hour talking about it and more. So I'd encourage you to join us on Friday for our conflict of interest and industry interference webinar. We're going to take a deep dive into this issue. On Thursday, we have the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados, their event in commemoration of World Children's Day. So encourage you to attend. On the 2nd of December, I know we didn't get to chat about it, but we're all very interested in health-harming substances, including alcohol. And so the Healthy Caribbean Coalition will be hosting CARD, the Caribbean Alcohol Reduction Day webinar. So that's on the 2nd. So you can plug that in your calendars, scan the QR code. And I think lastly, if you want to continue to be a part of this group, a part of this space, and continue to connect and learn a bit more deeply about these issues, we're going to have the second part of our workshop. So Sharika mentioned the first that we held in September, October. We're going to have the second on December 10th. So scan that QR code. We would love to chat with you a bit more about the policy process, a bit more about designing smart advocacy plans, and to tell you a bit more about an opportunity to fund a potential advocacy effort in your local territory. So lots to discuss. Thanks, Sharika. I think that is it. Oh, last thing. If you, again, are interested in continuing to stay connected with us, please join our WhatsApp group. Yes, and thank you all again. Sharika, back over to you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Maybe you could just put is it still on the screen, with the QR code? Yes. So, okay, please join the WhatsApp group. We should stay connected so we can keep having conversations like these. I'm sure we can agree that one thing that has worked for any advocacy campaign is to just keep talking about the problem. And so we have to keep having these kinds of conversations until there's some progress made, and even then. And so please join the WhatsApp group so we can stay in touch, we can plan or advocacy campaigns. And please, 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 I hope to see you guys, everyone that was here today at our webinar on December 2nd. The first one was amazing, and we hope to continue doing things like that. Thank you so much for coming today. As I said before, hope to see you at the webinar. It's on December 10th. I am so sorry. It's on December 10th, but I hope to see you there. And thank you for being here. Bye, everybody.
Take care, everyone. Hope to see you again.